Welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we are putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees. And again today, I've got Greta Dare.
Hello, again.
So Greta, this is number 3 in our 3-part series covering the fall conference lineup in student housing.
3 for 3.
3 for 3. And this one is the National Multi-Housing Council and their student housing conference that is going to be October 3rd through 5th at the Hyatt Regency in Huntington Beach, California. So last year it was in Tampa. Now we're going to the other coast.
Regardless, the Pacific is still the best. So I'm just going to leave that right there.
You know, the few times that I've been to California, other than getting my toes in the ocean,
To mine for gold?
I've never actually gone out into the Pacific Ocean. I don't know why. I think it's because the sea life is like so much more, like you see the sea lions and stuff that are right there. And it's like, I don't really want to go in the water.
All right. I will say this. Despite the fact that I was born and bred in the Golden State, I actually really don't like swimming in the ocean. So I completely understand. I am a lake girl. I enjoy being on the lake, swimming in the lake. There are no scary things in the lake. I'm not going to get eaten by anything in the lake. No.
There's plenty of scary things.
There's not. But also in the ocean, like you can't just swim and just enjoy whatever. We're not here to talk about oceans. I will just say, I understand your sentiment, sir. Carry on.
Yeah. If I surfed, let me put it this way. If I was good at surfing, I would probably enjoy Pacific Coast much better. But anyway, so yeah, in regards to this conference and this specific interview I did with the conference, I spoke with Dave Borsos and Matthew Berger, who lead up everything student housing within the NMHC, and not just for this conference, but the other things that NMHC represents all of its members on. And Matthew will get a little bit more into that as we get into the interview. But, you know, I got to say, and I mentioned in the podcast, I went to the first ever, and this is the 16th, and I'm feeling old, and now this is the time when Greta pokes at me for being old.
Do you think that it takes away from my power when you point it out before I do? Because you are old.
I was hoping it was just kind of like, let's go ahead and set myself up.
I'm not that kind of bully. You can't take it away. It's never going anywhere.
So anyway,
I would like to point out, by the way, I just call myself a bully. I am only a bully to you, and it's only because I can be, because you're essentially family.
So thanks, I guess.
You're welcome. Again, carry on.
Yeah, this is probably one of my, not only is it the first, student housing conference on any kind of national platform, but it has really kind of maintained making sure that they're kind of staying true to who they are as NMHC and the type of value that they're bringing not only to their members, but also the guests to these conferences. And, I just congratulate them for being able to do that, because this is the one conference out of all the national and regional conferences that are put on for student housing right now. This is the one where I can really say there's a lot of things that happen on an annual basis. Not just with transactions, but really finding out some of the operating mechanisms and those metrics related to those mechanisms that they're able to share with everybody else. So if it's an income to expense analysis that was very, very helpful to the industry, as well as a new research project that they talk about in this interview, being able to bring those things, work on those projects through the year, and then bring that into this conference for a discussion, I think it's invaluable. It really is.
100% agree. There was a lot of stuff that was talked about during the interview, which obviously I am enormously obsessed with, anything relating to market research, and they provide an invaluable amount of information in regards to that. But additionally, my very first conference ever that I went to in student housing was NMHC 4 years ago in Chicago. And it was a great experience for me. I thoroughly enjoyed the panels, especially. I got to listen to people and gain different perspectives and hear different viewpoints from, different leaders throughout the industry. And that I don't know, it was a really, really great experience and I took a lot away from it. So I'm very excited about this conference. Obviously it's the second time that I've said that, third time that I've said it, millionth time, who knows? But I do think that this one holds a great amount of value. And obviously the industry agrees with that. Everybody shows up. So I think it's going to be a great one this year.
Good point. And I don't, I don't want to sit here and talk forever about how great I feel like, or we both feel like this conference is.
Fair enough.
They're all great. I think NMHC does a very good job of separating the networking side of it with, the learning side of it. And to the point, I've even had last year when I went, they actually, folks that had rented out other rooms in order to have business development conversations, they had to go across the street to the other hotel to do that simply because.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Kudos to them for sticking to their guns on that, because it really does provide the right environment for those that are there wanting to learn, to not just be bombarded by, everything that's happening from a networking standpoint. So glad for that. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and push play on this interview. David Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's great to be here with you.
Well, I know it was, you guys were guests on the podcast last year when we were at the event. And it's hard to believe that a whole nother year has almost gone by since we met in Tampa last year. But the 16th annual Student Housing Conference the NMHC puts on is coming up in October. And wanted to spend some time with you guys and kind of understand. Every year we see this conference evolve and get better and bigger, and really wanted to get with you guys and understand what's coming up next for this conference in October, and what's happened this past year that is really surprising you as well, as far as the industry is concerned, and what kind of pressures that's putting on you guys as both of an organization as well as with this conference. But really quick, for those in the audience who may not be that familiar with NMHC, give just a little bit of background on what NMHC does, and what part do you guys play in the picture as well.
Certainly. So NMHC is the nation's premier trade association that represents the leading owners, developers, and managers of multifamily housing writ large. And what we do is we provide industry-leading government affairs representation, research, and networking opportunities for our members. One segment of our membership that we're very excited about and which we're extremely happy to represent is the student housing membership. About 2 years ago now, my friend and colleague Dave Borsos and I began to co-lead the student housing practice. And what's interesting about that is that our other hats are we work in the government affairs division, where Dave handles our capital markets issues before the U.S. Congress and regulators, and I handle our tax issues before government officials. And what we want to do with student housing is not only to continue promoting networking opportunities and industry-leading research, but we also want to integrate the government affairs function into our student housing activities. For example, tax reform has an enormous impact on the economics of student housing transactions. And we certainly wanted to make sure that our student housing members were well represented as the industry tackled tax reform last year.
Now I've got some other questions on my ass, but let's go ahead and dive in. So, Matthew, thanks for that, and let's dive into a few things that are specific with the conference that's coming up this year. I like to tell people that I attended the first ever NMHC Student Housing Conference, but I'm really starting to leave that detail out of my story as I'm starting to show my age, and that really starts to show my age when we talk about the first one being 16 years ago. But as I mentioned before, this thing has evolved every year. It's grown in attendance every year. What's changing this year? How are things evolving this year over the previous years?
Yeah, great question. You would think that as the industry has evolved, things may slow down a little bit. You're right, it's the 16th year, but it continues to evolve. It continues to surprise us in many ways. There were a couple of very large transactions announced this year, kind of thematically keeps with what's happened in the last few years as well. And we'll be covering that and discussing that at the conference. Development pipeline, interest in the industry from new investors is just very strong. And so we think the conference evolves along with the industry. So this year we are continue on a theme that we started last year, which is a dual tracking, where we have a couple of different panels during the conference where we cover both the capital markets side of the business, but also the operations side. And you can kind of get deep within each one of those particular tracks. And along with that, we have a couple of really interesting keynote speakers. I think we'll talk a little bit more about them in a bit. And just always great networking opportunities. People attend conferences and we always get feedback, regardless of whether it's our student housing conference or any of the other conferences that we put together. The very first thing that people always put in terms of what they want to get out of it is they want to network. So we are expanding the networking opportunities for attendees, not only the time available, but also the locations as well as meeting areas as well. So we're looking forward to being able to deliver some of that as well. And the one other thing that is of particular note that we're kind of proud at as well is that, this is an evolving industry. And one of the things that Matthew and I thought as representatives for the student housing industry is there needs to be more research. We get questions all the time about the industry, whether it's numerical, whether it's numbers of investors, how many beds, et cetera. And so we established a NMHC research fund where we raised money from a number of our members, and we're rolling and announcing that research fund at our conference. And we will have the first delivery of a research report that will be presented at the conference. So we're also excited about that as well.
Yeah, that's great. So I almost feel like you said you'd be announcing it, but I kind of feel like maybe this podcast has just served as breaking news. So,
yeah, well, it gives a little bit of an interest hook for people who are thinking about coming, but may be really interested in looking at that as well.
Great. One thing you mentioned, providing the networking on top of the sessions, and one thing that, and I've just got to tell you guys and your team this, I really do appreciate, because so many of the conferences, be it inside this industry or outside of it, it's the networking almost becomes a distraction from trying to get any good updates or content of what's being presented. And you guys have done a great job in everything that I've attended with NMHC, be it OpTech or this event, of really separating that out, given spaces and times for both, but not allowing the networking side of it to really interfere with the learning part of it. So just some personal things from me. I appreciate you guys giving that attention to detail.
Well, we
thanks.
appreciate
it's really
that.
great to hear.
So this year's event, obviously in California, in Huntington Beach, just south of LA. I know this conference has been in Phoenix before. I can't remember it being. Has it ever been in California before? I
don't think it has.
Yeah, I don't think it has either. But is there any strategy or reason that you guys chose California this year? And does being on the West Coast allow for any opportunities that returning attendees from previous years may not have experienced?
Student housing has really emerged on the map as an extremely national industry, and we love to rotate between the East and West Coast to really reflect that and to recognize that our members are really nationwide. So last year we were in Tampa, and this year on the Atlantic, or at least close to the Atlantic, and this year we're going to be actually right on the Pacific Ocean in a very beautiful venue on Huntington Beach. Student housing is much like our annual meeting in our OpTech meeting, which was talked about earlier, where we try to do exactly the same thing by rotating it around and making it more accessible to all.
Yeah, it's good to change venue. That's for sure. And I'm sure that many of, as I was attending another national conference earlier this year and seeing the influx of the Asian investors that are coming into this space, I'm sure they'll appreciate not having to make that additional layover once they get stateside of having to go to somewhere else, being able to make that straight shot to LA. I'm sure they'll probably appreciate that as well. Speaking of investors, I want to kind of skip ahead here for just a minute. So day two's general session, it's labeled New Kids on the Block, Evolving Equity Providers. I'm interested if you can expand a little bit on what to expect from that session and what exactly do you mean by new kids on the block? Are there investors that have come new to it this year, or just really want to understand the message behind that title a little bit? So
the intent of the panel and why we're bringing that in is that we've seen a significant inbound interest in student housing sector. So for many, many years, it was viewed as a small segment. While you certainly had investor interest domestically, it was certainly much smaller, and the interest from institutional as well as sovereign wealth funds as well as international money was very limited in comparison to the broader market rate multifamily industry. So what has now evolved is you see significant players who have significant balance sheets or managing significant amount of capital looking to invest. And when they invest in these particular segments and they decide to go in, they can certainly move a lot of money at the same time. So what we're hoping to cover in this particular session is, in fact, to give some highlights, hear from some of these players that have had a significant influence of bringing new sources of capital, sometimes lower cost of capital, sometimes with different views on long versus short term within the industry. And so we thought it would be very influential to have a group of people who can provide some of their insight as to why they are investing in the sector, and then also give some idea of who else besides the people on the stage are looking at the sector, whether they're doing it through joint ventures, whether they're investing directly with some of our existing student housing members, or whether they are doing direct investments as well. So it is certainly a representation of the evolution of the industry in terms of who the players are from the equity side.
Perfect. Okay. Going back to day one here for just a second, you've got Amy Trask as the opening keynote speaker. Of course, she's the former CEO of the Raiders and the first, and unless if I'm mistaken, so far the only female CEO of a NFL team. I haven't read her book yet, but I've seen a lot of her interviews on YouTube and that type of thing. And she's got some great stories about, working with the owner, Al Davis, who was a special character himself, and especially, the negotiating side of her business as well. She's got a lot of great stories on that. And I love that you guys were able to get Amy for this conference because of that just unique perspective that she has. But you guys have labeled the session as a fireside chat, which I'm sure probably, goes back to, FDR's fireside chat, and it's a little bit more of an intimate setting and that type of thing. But it also typically means that, it's very open to the audience as far as being able to ask questions and making comments. Is that the intent with this? And if so, the audience members that we have that plan on attending, what type of things would you tell them to, kind of be prepared for to ask Amy?
So that's a great question. And first and foremost, we're very, very excited to have Amy come speak. We certainly look forward to our Student Housing Council Chairman, Brian Dinnerstein from the Dinnerstein Companies, facilitating this chat. I know that he's going to have some really enlightening and wonderful questions. As for the audience, Wes, it's a little hard for us to predict exactly what they're going to ask. But what I can tell you is I would expect those questions, particularly because she used to work for the Raiders, to be extraordinarily entertaining and to certainly delve into the issues of the day, particularly given that the football season will only be just a few weeks old at the time the conference takes place. Exactly.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the expo here for a second as well. Again, every year the expo's gotten bigger and larger as well. I remember when there was not an expo that was a part of this conference. So I know that it was something that was much appreciated when you guys introduced it. And give us kind of a rundown, just a quick summary of what the listeners can expect to see when they're attending the expo hall.
First and foremost, we're extremely excited that the expo is sold out. We have 53 participants, and like I said, we're once again sold out this year. One of the nice things about the expo is that we've got vendors representing literally every piece of the student housing business, from furniture to package delivery to data to billing to networking solutions to architects. So what's very nice about this is that it's going to be one-stop shopping for the executives who are able to walk the trade show floor. And we certainly encourage absolutely every executive to do so, because they'll get a really great opportunity to learn about the very latest and greatest products and services that are available to their companies and to their customers.
For those listeners planning to attend the conference in October, what suggestion would you give them to make sure they have a positive ROI from their investment of both their money and time? The conference is 3 days long. Obviously, with it being West Coast, it certainly demands getting there, at least the evening before day one, and being on the beach and everything else. It's probably worth taking an extra day and not leaving until Saturday or Sunday. So just outside of that, obviously there's a lot of time that goes into this, as well as their money that's being invested into it. What suggestions would you have for them to prepare themselves in order to get the best out of this conference?
I think that the return for any one of the attendees of our conference depends on what they want to get out of it. So if you're there to network, as we had mentioned earlier, we've certainly expanded the opportunities for people to network. Those people who register have access to the attendee list on our website, so they could go ahead of time and try and reach out to some of the other attendees to set up networking opportunities. In order to facilitate that as well, NMHC has an app for all of our conferences, and 1 week ahead of the conference, it's populated with the ability to reach out directly through that app and request meetings with the other attendees as well. So if that's kind of one of your main goals, that would certainly be a couple of different ways that I would recommend people look towards maximizing their return. If you're there for content, not only are the general sessions broadly applicable to anybody who's interested in learning more about the industry, or we've talked about Amy Trask, also learning about some other components of how to be successful in negotiating. The other part of that would be we've got concurrent sessions. So if you're deeply interested in the operational side, certainly a number of panels that will meet some of your needs there. But if you're a capital markets development investor type, then we've got a series of panels as well, meet those needs as well. So it really, and you know what, if you're new to the industry, you may attend more of those. If you're a longtime veteran of attending these, then you certainly know the ins and outs of how to maximize that, because the people that you want to meet are going to be there. So it certainly maximizes your ability in terms of how to get in front of some of the people that you are certainly want to meet with as well. So I think it appeals to anybody who has an interest in the industry, no matter kind of what their needs and desires are and goals are in terms of coming to the meeting.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the attendee list and being able to get that up front. Last year, I think I registered actually at the table on the day that it started, which is not what I would certainly recommend to anyone. But immediately I was able to get access to that attendee list on the app, which was great. And there were a lot of folks that I was not able to contact beforehand and didn't have their contact information, but was able to look them up through the app and schedule a meeting with them, which was great. That the app that you guys have is really great for these conferences. So,
well, we're glad to hear that it worked exactly like we wanted it to work. So.
Good. So guys, obviously, as I just mentioned, you can register at the event on day one, which may be convenient for some people who don't really know yet what their calendar is going to look like that specific week. But for those that know they're going to go and they want to get the most out of it, you guys actually have a deadline coming up on September 4th for reduced registration fees, correct?
That is correct.
Great. And as far as registering, everything should be done online. Anything in regards to becoming a member for those that are members of NMHC, is there a better way for them to register versus just going through the website?
Well, I think anytime you can do an online registration, it certainly facilitates it for everybody. We always encourage our members to go ahead and register, and depends on their either if they're a sponsor of NMHC or whether they actually are, depending on their level of membership, they do receive certain number of complimentary registrations, as well as a discounted fee to register versus the general public. So certainly would encourage people, if they're going to come, they're really strongly thinking about it, that next week is the cutoff for the early bird registration, and rates will go up from there. But as you'd mentioned, for those making last minute decisions like yourself, we certainly welcome walk-ins as well. We always get quite a number of walk-ins every single year who can't figure out what their calendar is going to be until very close to the time of the conference, and still want to attend given the content of the conference, what they get out of it, the networking opportunities. They recognize that oftentimes that is priceless in comparison to the registration fee.
Great. And how are things going with the room block so far? Are you guys still have rooms available at the Hyatt Regency, or are there other hotels that you're pushing folks to at this point?
You know, it's Matthew and I deal a lot with our great meetings team here, but I honestly don't. That's a question that I don't think we've asked them recently, knowing kind of what the room availability is. But certainly, if it is sold out, there are definitely some. They always have a hotel backup if needed.
Well, great. Well, I plan on making my reservations today or tomorrow for sure. So before I put the podcast out, I'll make sure that I give everybody an update in the outro on if I was able to book at the Hyatt Regency or not. But well, great guys. Well, listen, I appreciate it. I hope that we'll be able to spend some time together at the conference and have kind of some takeaways as well. And anything else that you want to bring up for the audience?
Not on my end, other than to say that we really appreciate the time.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate everything you guys are doing, not just for the student housing industry, but for multifamily housing kind of across the board. But again, I'm very grateful that you guys are providing this conference for the student housing industry, and look forward to seeing you guys in October.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wes.
Take care. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Well, guys, there you have it. Again, this is the NMHC Annual Student Housing Conference in Huntington Beach, California, between October 3rd and October 5th. So it's a Wednesday through Friday. So let's talk really quick about who should be going to this conference. If you are at a site level position, unless if you're looking at and you've already had this conversation with your company, unless if you're looking at moving into a regional or upper level management role within the next year, I wouldn't spend the money on going to this. It's $1,400 if you're a non-NMHC member. It's pretty expensive, and unless if you're at a stage in your career where you really want to get a broader perspective of what's going on in the industry, beyond your market and kind of what's happening, not just within this country, but even how the outside world is kind of looking into this country at this industry. I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense. If you are a developer, if you are a general contractor, if you are certainly within the C-suite and executive level and business development roles within a large management company, definitely this is something that you should be at. So hopefully that helps a little bit with understanding if this is something you should be going to or not. Well, guys, I will be at the conference. If you plan to be at the conference either as an exhibitor or as an attendee and want to get some time to talk about what's going on with your company and what's going on within the industry, would love to sit down and talk with you. So if you would like to schedule some time with me at the conference, then by all means, go to either one of our websites, either studenthousinginsight.com or my consulting firm, providentialstudenthousing.com. There will be a link there to schedule some time with me at the event, and look forward to meeting you there. Also, we're going to be doing one of our, I think I need a drum roll. Can you do one of your great drum rolls again?
I don't know that I could just do it on demand like that. I can't. It feels so stupid. And go.
That was horrible. That
Wait,
was absolutely.
drum roll.
I like that. I mean, that sounds like you're a couple of glasses of wine into the evening.
You don't know my life. Maybe I did.
No, the other one sounded like a Gatling gun going off. It was...
Wait. Hold on. I'll just do it on my desk. Hold on. Tell me, can you hear this?
That works.
Okay.
That works. So a lot of you guys saw one of the things that we did at the Interface conference back in April, where we recorded I'll call it a panel podcast. And that was our very famous or infamous, I don't know how it's really viewed by the world, but our site level to C-suite podcast. We're going to be doing something similar.
I loved that podcast. We're calling it famous.
Okay. No, I loved it as well. It's certainly been, the most highly downloaded for
true.
sure. And it is also, it was a lot of fun putting on. So anyway, we're going to be doing something similar to that for the NMHC conference. There will be details that we will have to email you. So if you want to be notified about this, if you want to take part either from a sponsorship standpoint, looking to attend, and the audience, then make sure that you go and sign up for the Student Housing Insight community. You just go to studenthousinginsight.com and sign up for the Student Housing Insight community. There's a button up in the upper right-hand corner, and we'll make sure that we get all of your information, and we'll alert you of the details for that conference or for that panel podcast. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Well, guys, I'm really looking forward to meeting any of you folks that are going to be at the conference that I've never met before, and I look forward to talking to you later.
Bye.